everyone, welcome. Good morning, good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us wherever you are today. This is an exciting one for us. My name is Samantha. I am a marketing manager at Telgorithm, a leading SMS and MMS API provider for vertical SaaS companies. I'm here with Aaron Alter, as always, Telgorithm CEO and co-founder. But this is a very special format. If you've seen any of our recent Q&As, we've had quite a few this year. We've done a lot of deep dives on specifically 10DLC messaging and the many changes that are going on in 10DLC, the new regulations, requirements. There's so much to talk about there. But today we're really excited because we are actually joined by Julia Medwid, who is a product manager at Walla Software. Walla is one of Telgorithm's earliest customers. It is an all-in-one studio management software for boutique fitness businesses. We're going to be diving into what Walla Software is, the impact it's making in their industry and their market, their decision to switch from another SMS API provider over to Telgorithm, and how the partnership between Telgorithm and Walla has impacted each business. So with all that being said, we're really excited to dive in. Aaron, I'm going to pass it over to you to say hello and give your intro, and then we'll pass it over to Julia.
Of course. Thanks so much, Samantha, and thanks for setting all these up all the time. I know a lot of the work and effort that goes into these, and we're super appreciative for that. I'll also say up the top is, as you mentioned, Telgorithm is all about providing information, transparency, constant updates to the industry. What I'll say is this is a first of, we've had many on, we'll call it quasi-podcast webinars, but there is nothing like having an actual customer that's actually driven the car, as they say, and used the product and able to give feedback on that. That is something that we hold closely, customer experience, particularly in this industry. Getting a good customer experience is unfortunately hard to come by, and one of our missions here at Telgorithm is to change that one step at a time, or one text at a time, as they say here. And I'm really excited for Walla and Julia to be joining us today to be able to discuss that. And I'll just also say up from the top, again, we're a company of transparency. We talk about the good and the bad, if there is any bad. So I will also say I'm going into this kind of blindly, which is a good thing, to let the audience know that this is how it is. And this is how the experience is with Telgorithm. And I'm hoping that we can get some further conversation with anyone because of this. And feel free to reach out to us at any time with any questions or any information needed at any time. But that said, Julia, if you want to introduce yourself briefly.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for having me, inviting me to chat with you guys today. Super excited. My name is Julia. I work as a product manager here at Walla. I've been with us, Walla, for about 2+ years. Previous to that, I've worked in the fitness wellness tech space for 4 years prior to that. So I'm very passionate about working in the wellness industry. And specifically to Walla, I work across our web team, as well as managing our iOS and Android apps that are more client-facing for our customers.
Awesome. Thank you, Julia. And thank you so much for being here. Can you tell us a little bit more about Walla? Tell us more about the product.
Yeah, for sure. So Walla is a software management system that enables boutique fitness studio owners to essentially run their businesses. So they can do everything from managing their class schedule to managing their staff, updating, looking at reporting, running payroll. That's super high level. So there's the customer side, which are Walla's customers, and then we also have their clients to consider. And I'm sure we're going to dive into all of our use cases, but that's really where SMS comes into play in terms of our customers communicating with their clients. So when somebody goes to book at their Pilates studio or yoga studio, they're booking through Walla to book that fitness class.
Awesome. That's great. Thank you. What is unique about Walla Software or offering?
Yeah. So, we are a startup. So I feel like working in the software startup space means we can move quickly. I think that definitely helps set us apart. And then not everybody, but a lot of people on our team also come from the fitness wellness space. So we have people with 10+ years of experience who bring that to the table, from leadership to developers to support. And I think that's just invaluable. You can't replicate that.
Yeah, expertise is so important on a team. That's really cool.
Sure.
Thank you. And
Yeah.
one really exciting thing that we know about is Walla launched in 2021 and hit Series A funding in 2022. Can you talk to us a little bit about that major milestone and, what that's meant to the business?
Yeah, absolutely. That was definitely a very exciting milestone for us. But yeah, we have a really big product, very tech heavy, and we're competing with a company, MindBody, who's been in the space for 20 plus years. And they've also built a massive amount of code. So in order to reach that feature parity, and obviously go beyond that, like I think it's required more funding than maybe your traditional lean startup might. And then on the flip side, like we know our product market fit. So we're not like guessing or spending money necessarily on that like learning and testing phase. But super excited, and it was a great milestone for the team.
Yeah, congratulations. That's really exciting. And we were very proud to be there for you when you hit that.
Yes.
So you alluded to this before, but obviously Walla offers SMS and MMS messaging. Can you talk to us more about the use cases for SMS and MMS?
Yeah. So when we launched with a lot of like transactional notifications, I would say. And we had transactional and marketing, but we've really built out our marketing since then. Transactional, though, are a use case would be like I book at my Pilates studio and I get that confirmation, or I book a live stream class and we send out that link with that live stream link. Um, Other use cases, I buy a package at my studio and I get that confirmation. So we have like a lot of transactional notifications as use cases for sure. And then we also have built out things since then. So we have like our inbox, and I think this is something that Telgorithm has really helped us enable, which is like two-way texting. So like our customers can communicate directly with their clients and vice versa. So they can message back and forth and see that all in one place. And then we've recently launched our marketing automations, which is a really big feature within our software, and we're really excited about. But it's essentially the ability to like set up an automation, such as like send people with birthdays between these dates a message. So sending out SMS, sending it and leaving it, and letting the guesswork kind of be taken out of it. But it's really cool because our customers can get really creative with how they want to communicate with their clients, essentially.
That's awesome. Cool. Thank you
Yeah,
for sharing.
for sure.
When it comes to your customers, I mean, do you see your SMS and MMS offering as like a critical component of your platform?
Definitely. I mean, I don't think we could have, like, we couldn't not have SMS. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like our customers need to be able to communicate with their clients. And we need to try to make it as effortless as possible. So it's definitely a critical part. And it's one of those things where, we've launched and then we've built on it as the software has evolved.
Awesome. Erin, have you seen that with a lot of customers? Is there usually kind of an evolution of building upon the messaging use cases that customers are adding to their slate?
Yeah, I mean, this is right on track with what a typical company trajectory. When they first start adding text, it's first for, the most critical of stuff, which is, booking appointments. And then once they see that's going, leaning more to the marketing side. I'll even expand further here and ask you a question is, and thank God, and you could talk to that on your own, and we want to hear that from you. But what would it mean to Walla, and more specifically to Walla's businesses, that Pilates shop, if, for instance, even for an hour, text messaging somehow stopped working, or someone didn't get text delivered even randomly or intermittently? What would be the impact of that? If you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, that is huge. And that is exactly like why it's such a big consideration when finding our provider. So I think the implication there is like if that text message doesn't come through and that reminder isn't sent out, somebody misses class, and that's an impact directly to that business. And then that is a direct reflection of Walla, right? Like they're gonna potentially lose trust in our software. So it's definitely a big consideration, and one like that we definitely don't take lightly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you want to add something, Erin?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I think about, especially in that kind of a setup, is imagine, so someone's calling in, scheduling whatever it is, a booking, and sometimes I imagine it can be done over the phone, correct? or even online?
Yeah. Yep.
So
Either
what
one.
happens if somebody typos a phone number? Let's
Right.
just say, right? What typically happens in that scenario?
Yeah. In that scenario, then it's going to end up going to the wrong person. And like that's like a user error use case. I feel like that's hard because it's like human error.
Mhm.
But it still invites those questions like, why didn't I get that? Like, what happened here? And then like troubleshooting that to figure out like where and what went wrong. Right.
Mm.
Totally. So one of the things, and again, as I mentioned at the top of the caller, just to add full on thing and a cool feature that we have, I'm not sure if you guys are leveraging yet, in addition to everything else we'll discuss today, is the ability to do a live real-time lookup on a phone number to see if it's actually a real number, and it's live with what's called the OSR, the registrar right now. That this is the place where, when you port phone numbers, it's all in some high level place at the carrier side. So we have an API that we actually almost charge nothing for, that you could bake into your logics, so that when a customer calls in and that rep hits a save button in your application and that they're using, which is Walla, it'll do that lookup. And if there's any sort of typo in there, it'll instantly notify them, hey, sir, ma'am, can I really, can you repeat that number, please? Saving that information right then and there. So I'm not sure if you guys are leveraging yet. I'll have to check on that, but it's a later cool feature that we have that we refined that could help in that scenario. And obviously, just like you said, sometimes if someone misses something, it could potentially lead to, either a loss of business or a bad customer experience. Just wanted to throw that
Totally.
in.
Yeah, for sure. That, I mean, could be awesome for sure. I would love to hear more about that.
Right, because even if it's a customer error, it's still that customer perception that it was
Yeah.
a Walla error. That's difficult.
Yeah, exactly.
Or the studio. So you spoke about choosing an API provider and why that's so important. Can you talk to us a little bit about your original API provider and why you decided to or needed to switch to another?
Yeah. So our original provider was Twilio, and that's who we launched with in like June of 2021. And honestly, like our experience with them, and ultimately, I think what led us to switch away from it was the fact that we didn't have a dedicated support person. So it really made it difficult to get direct answers. And when something changed from like a compliance perspective, like, better than anyone, there's like so much documentation that's related to staying compliant and staying up to date. And I think there was just like a miss for us there where we felt like we weren't necessarily like getting that information. So, and then, being a startup, like we're moving quickly. So like if we needed an answer or needed to like figure something out quickly so we could make a change, I think we just had like issues with that, and it ultimately led us to change.
That makes a lot of sense. Do you have anything to add to that, Aaron?
Yeah, so one of the things that's interesting about this, so a lot of what Telgorithm does more than anything is this, we're very niche in this new world called A to P 10DLC, which sounds like a foreign language and a very long acronym to many people. And so when Walla first joined us, A to P 10DLC did exist, and we kind of got them prepped and prepared for that. I think at that time, to what Julia mentions, is they were just looking for a better provider, somebody to give them guidance, to listen to them, to talk to them. And in that process, they kind of maybe had this vague, because back then, 2.5 years ago, although it existed, many people didn't even know about A to P 10 DLC. They were just trying to figure out how to get my messages working in what we'll call the old world. And so what that allowed us to do is kind of in stages, because of having a dedicated Slack channel that we offer to all of our customers and continuous collaboration and updates, we've been able to guide Walla through this process of A to P10. You'll see, if I'm not mistaken, earlier on, you guys are still leveraging it, but you're leveraging a lot of toll free. And now you're started to leverage local phone numbers as well, which has its tremendous amount of benefits, lower costs, the availability to be able to post numbers locally for a lot of these businesses versus using a toll-free number. And so I wanted to just expand on this and get your take as to A to P 10 DLC in general, how you found what your understanding is of it, how we've helped you in this area thus far, and what you make of it in general.
Yeah. So yeah, the 10 DLC, I feel like that was something that it's hard to like truly understand and understand where you need to implement it within your product. versus like the toll-free number and how many numbers should my customers have. There's so many like nuances to it. And I feel like without Telgorithm, like I feel like it would have been so much more complicated, because I feel like you guys really like broke it down for us and helped navigate and helped us essentially implement what we have today that's working really well. And then you touched on the Slack channel, which I have to tell you, like we love because we honestly like leverage that a lot, even to this day, you know, almost 2 years later. If we have a question or we're running into something, there's always somebody to answer our questions. And that's really so important. And our support team really values that as well. But yeah, in terms of 10 DLC, I feel like that the documentation that you provided us really helped us get to where we are.
And that's awesome. And we'll continue to keep doing that because it's an ever evolving thing that's industry wide. Thinking at it now, you know, things are still very dynamic in this area. What are things that you know of in A2P 10ELC thus far that, hey, if I didn't get guidance on this, this potentially would have, you know, been a nightmare. We wouldn't have even understood what this is. I mean, I'll just throw out some names out there: a brand, a campaign, a vetting, you know, an opt-in, an opt-out. I don't know if any of these things ring a bell. And again, there's still challenges on these things today because there are things that are changing. But as far as, you know, help and guidance or thinking about the lack thereof, if you had to navigate this, if you could paint the picture of in a day-to-day, how that really helps you and ultimately helps your customer, right? Because at the end of the day, with registration, you know, it's a process, but ultimately it's a process that leads to a goal, which ultimately gives a better texting experience to the, you know, to the spa or that salon.
Yeah. You mentioned opt-in and opt-out, and I would say like that's a huge area for us because we have studios across multiple states that have different regulations in terms of the laws where, you know, when you sign up as a user, like, can you be opted in or can you be opted out? And I think that's a big area that we've needed guidance on, and making sure that like if we suggest the right or wrong thing to our customer, that could maybe result in like texting being turned off, you know, just based on compliance. So that definitely is a huge conversation on our side, and making sure that our studios are doing the correct thing for their clients, especially as it pertains. And I think that's the interesting part is like when we talk about transactional notifications versus marketing and what that means for opting in and out. That was definitely a tricky part for us to navigate as we evolved into that more marketing space. And I also think about that when we think about like two-way texting. Like, I feel like some of the onus is sometimes on the business owner. Like, are they sending a marketing message or are they sending a transactional notification? And is that up to them to decide, or is it up for us to decide? So yeah, I feel like it's very nuanced and complicated.
Keep going, Samantha.
All right, awesome. Good stuff. So with all that being said, we know that your experience with Telgorithm has been good. Thank you for saying that. But what ultimately made you decide to switch to Telgorithm? What was kind of the like factor that made you guys move to Telgorithm from Twilio?
Yeah, I think it was honestly, it was the support person that led us to not having a support person that led us to Telgorithm. I think I've touched on the like documentation piece, and that was definitely really, really important to us, to make sure that we were getting those updates and then implementing updates as needed. And then I would say like in terms of considerations when it came to like switching, you know, we really talked a lot about what that implementation was going to look like on our side. Mm-hmm. I do feel it was almost 2 years ago, but it was seamless. And I think like when I think implementation, I think of like, how is it going to impact our customers, right? So I feel like that was a huge consideration, and you guys walked us through that. But like, when I think about that, I think of like when they need to get a number approved, like, is that going to be the same process as before? Or is it going to take longer, shorter? Just really making sure that we could like level set with our customers for any changes that were going to happen.
Aaron, I'm definitely going to have you add in here because implementation is huge for every company. It's a really big deal.
Right. I'll also point out a nuance here that may or may not have been noticed, and it's something that was available, we'll say, with some other vendors, not the case today. So you may or may not be aware of this, and you may be leveraging it, and you can if you have not been. But basically, for the most part, industry-wide, as of September 1st, there is no longer a concept of sending a text message from a local phone number, otherwise known as this 10DLC, unless that phone number is tied to a fully registered and what's called DCA approved, or Direct Connect Aggregator approved campaign. And as you mentioned, right now, there's obviously delays in this process. So even if you have the right information, so you need a partner that will guide you on the process to becoming registered. What are they looking for in a call to action section? We talked about privacy policy, and there was guidance given as short as 2 weeks ago about some changes in this area, and it's dynamic. It's constantly changing here. You need a partner to inform you of that. But this all, in addition to that, it also takes time, right? There's somebody that's upstream, this is industry-wide, that's manually looking at each and every single branding campaign to make sure it meets those compliance rules and requirements, whatever they are in that given day. We'll admit that. And so one of the abilities that Telgorithm provides uniquely, and this was not easy to be able to discuss or to get this approval, and it's very rare to even see this today, is the ability to send traffic while you're waiting for the DCA approval. So it used to be that you could send what's called unregistered traffic, during this time. Obviously, there's a higher carrier pass-through fee, and there's some more filtering in doing that, but you could still send messages. Today, for the most part, industry-wide, as of September 1st, that is no longer available. So if there is a delay, someone wants to get a new number or, port a number over from somewhere, maybe it's already registered somewhere else, and they want to ensure that there's no disruption there. So Telgorithm uniquely provides the ability for customers to be able to send text messages. Granted, it's a higher pass-through for a short period. It's not a permanent solution, but we provide that ability to help streamline the process for these businesses, legitimate businesses that are on the path to becoming registered as well. So not sure if that's something your team is leveraging at all today, but it is a capability that Telgorithm has that in today's day, specifically today, matters a lot for many, many customers.
Yeah.
Yeah, avoiding disruptions is always important.
Mm-hmm.
But back to implementation in general, there is a perception, and maybe with certain providers or some certain companies or part of your tech stack, it can be very engineering heavy and can take a very long time in building out into your roadmap. We encounter that a lot, that it is perceived to be a really labor intensive project, and that it's something that will derail your business and impact your customers ultimately. Aaron, do you want to talk a little bit about our implementation process?
Yeah, and that's something, if I recall, Tala, amazing engineer on your end. We obviously engaged really early on. I looked, like you said, our documentation. So there's obviously a perception many times, and sometimes that is a valid perception that, I'm with a Twilio today, like you mentioned, and I'm fully integrated. And as you know, being on the product side of a company, that, switching any provider, let alone a telco provider, is looked at as, oh my gosh, forget about this, porting numbers, integrating elsewhere, disruptions. No one wants to think about doing that at all. So much so that people will remain with a vendor that is really not the right vendor for them. And they know that for a long time, just because there is this, we'll call it a stigma many times, of switching providers. And it's not, I wouldn't even say I would characterize it as a stigma. Many times it's actually the truth. What Telgorithm went at lengths to do is to provide ways, whether it be changing a few snippets of code for what you have set up on Twilio, creating an automated API that allows you to submit port requests automatically in a streamlined way that connects the carrier level with your API. But if I was to recall, and I can't say it specifically because to this point, we've in this period, we've fortunately been humbled to onboard many, many customers. But I would say the integration period of time was probably in a week to 2 week area max. If I recall that setup, it's probably less than that, definitely not more, because of two things. Again, from what I recall from that setup, one, the dedicated Slack channel and your engineering team directly collaborating with ours. and also the straightforward documentation, but also even more than the documentation, the APIs we've built have built such a streamlined APIs that just makes it very easy to integrate. Almost the way that I put it is, you guys already had the plug built. You're just changing, outlets. So you already have the cord. You're just changing, versus you're not building the, the cord itself. And if I recall correctly, back then, that seemed to me, at least the feedback that I got from Tala and your engineering team, about how smooth that process was. And this is just alluding to, again, what Samantha is saying here. There's many times a perception that, hey, things are not going well, but it's going to be an absolute nightmare. And I don't want to deal with this at all, going through this process. And I don't know how much insight you have into that from back then, but anything you could share along those lines in regards to that here would be helpful.
Yeah, totally. Well, Tala is amazing. We'll start there. And I feel like he can take something like that and make it feel effortless. And so I feel like him being able to tackle that with the documentation and support of your team and the Slack channel, I don't remember it taking more than a 2-week sprint, which I feel like is not a long time when you think about like changing something as impactful as like your texting provider. So I can't speak further into like the implementation, but I know that it didn't feel as big of a lift and barrier as I think it can feel upfront, right? Like it is a big deal to switch your provider. Like you don't want your end users to be impacted. But I think ultimately, like thinking about like, okay, like where do we want to take this? And can we take our product where we want to go with where we are right now? And I think we asked ourselves that question, and the answer was no, which led us to Telgorithm. So it's sometimes like the cost is like worth it, right? Like at the time, whatever like implementation barriers there are.
Totally. So it's a big part of it.
Yeah.
Were there any other challenges that your team faced or like concerns you had about switching in general, whether it was with Telgorithm or anyone else?
I think I touched on the part where we weren't sure what it was going to look like for like our customers and that like approval process. I know some of it is kind of like out of all the providers' hands, I think so, but we wanted to make sure that there wasn't going to be like further implications to them. And then I would say like, we're a startup and, Telgorithm is also a startup. So that was definitely part of our conversation. Like, it's daunting to move to any new provider, but I think like knowing that we're also in that same situation, like took like that was not a barrier. It was just a conversation about being a startup, joining another startup. But I think like those were the main ones really. I think we were just excited to have support, honestly, and have somebody to like answer all of our questions.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks. I mean, I think that we hear this so often, how appreciated the customer support is. I know that when Aaron founded the company, and I'll let you speak to it, Aaron, but that was a huge, one of our huge ethos. It's something that's very, very important to us because it is something that's not really seen a lot of times in this industry for whatever reason. Aaron, I know you were a customer before. Maybe you can speak to your experience and why you established Telgorithm in this way.
Yeah, sure. Before I get to that, though, I want to address the word startup, though. So while startup land, we're all in this world, and particularly in Walla's case, sometimes that could be looked at as a positive, like you mentioned, and sometimes it can be looked at as a negative. Wait, this is a startup. This is not an application that I just download, and if I don't like it, I could just Postmates. I'm going to uninstall it and get DoorDash. These are mission critical APIs, and therefore part of that process is, and sometimes people look at it like, hey, Telgorithm is a startup. That's a good thing on the one way. On the other hand, startup, wait a second, I need to make sure that this platform stays live. So, before I get to the specific question you asked on that side, as far as the experience of the customer, which is super important, I'll get to that in a second. What has been the overall experience? I mean, you've been with us, quite a while now. As far as uptime, to your knowledge and your experience with Telgorithm and in general, what has been your experience?
Yeah, I mean, our experience has been honestly great. Like in terms of like onboarding and terms of communication, we've never, to my knowledge, had an issue where we had issues where like texts weren't sending or were landing to the wrong people. Like we haven't had anything like that. And I feel like we've just been supported in all of the additional use cases that I was mentioning in terms of like all of the marketing ones and the complications like with opting out and opting in, like I feel like our experience really has been great with Telgorithm helping us navigate all of those. So when it comes to like us wanting to launch a new feature, like hopping on a call, scheduling that, it's always been really like seamless for us.
Awesome.
And like,
And
and I think the end user, I think that that's the most important part is like our end users aren't impacted, right? Like our customers are really happy and their text messages are landing where they should be. And I feel like that's what all we can ask for, right?
mhm. I'll even add a point. Sometimes I say take it for granted while you can, because, and that's a good thing. But I will say to date, in our almost 2.5 year history, Telgorithm has never ever had an outage. Every single one of Telgorithm's competitors, or what's looked at as Telgorithm's competitors today, have had outages in the last 3 to 6 months alone, let alone the last 2.5 years. So when I hear things like, hey, how has the overall performance been, and talking more about customers rather than, hey, we had this outage and they came to it quickly, which we would if that ever were to happen, but just like that's not even a non-issue here, is mainly the point here. It's like, yeah, that's taken. That's that's a given situation here. But I felt it's worth, specifically people mentioning, startup, and that's worth calling out. As far as to what you mentioned, Samantha, absolutely. So the reason that we founded Telgorithm is because we weren't just some guys, let's just say, out of college that had some cool idea. It was, I myself have been in the telco industry for more than 20 years. And in the latter part of my career, prior to founding Telgorithm, I served as the head of telecommunications at another vertical SaaS startup for the home services industry. So similar concept to Walla, except for the home services industry. And that company was called Service Titan. So obviously just as important, or if not even maybe more important, someone has a broken faucet or sewer line break or an HVAC system that goes out in the middle of the summer, you don't get a text that a tech is on the way. You're going to have problems with that side of things. And so what resonated to me more than anything, or became an issue for me, is that the current status quo of the Twilio type company was more of, hey, how can we just get you in a contract? You call in for support when something is failing. You have to go up 3 levels of support, which takes a few days before someone even gets back as to what's going on, versus someone being proactive and saying, hey, here are things to look out for in advance. Here are ways you could set yourself up for success in advance, and giving you all of that information in detail up front. I'll even point out, you may not be aware of it, but Tala surely is whenever there's an error on Telgorithm, we actually send not only a code. So the typical state of the union today in general in cloud communication is the provider will just send some code. Then you got to go to a website to look up the code, to look up what the code might mean, to then only, usually get to a point where it's like, that sounds, it could be a couple of different things. So I'm not kind of not clear on this error. So then you have to then open a support ticket, but the support rep also doesn't know what it means. So he's got to jimmy it up 3 levels until they finally figure it out. Meantime, you have a customer that's been struggling for a week, and it could have been just something very simple or not, and they're struggling with an issue. So Telgorithm actually provides a layman description directly in your error. So cell phone was turned off, try again in 30 minutes. That's actually in our actual callback. On top of the Slack, on top of the support we give, we provide that information right then and there up front to help streamline when there are issues. No one is perfect, and I'm not saying Telgorithm will we work on trying to be perfect, but anyone, in tech world is susceptible. There's a lot of things that are beyond our control that can happen. But one of the things that we make it our thing to do is to set up processes and even redundancies infrastructure, so that, God forbid, when something does happen, we're able to immediately rectify the issue and be able to work with customers on the issue to get it resolved as quickly as possible. And again, that comes through customer understanding what it's like being the customer, and customer communication, and your bottom line, not necessarily just lowering your bill. Hey, I paid 00X for this for my undelivered text messages, so what benefit is that to anybody? So more than anything for us, and I'm sure you've experienced this, is that ultimately, with regards to Telgorithm, if your messages are not ultimately being delivered and your businesses are not getting messages delivered, we really don't have much today to sell you. So we couldn't sell you, a Flex or some of these other beautiful APIs that many of these other companies do. We need to make sure that we're on the hook, and we are going to continue to be on the hook to make sure that your messages are always delivered and you have that amazing experience, which is literally what we always wanted. Had to go down the rabbit holes to figure it all out. And that's really essentially what Telgorithm is all about. So it's glad to hear that, you guys are reaping benefit from that.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. Julia, what would you tell other software companies, maybe specifically PMs, what should they be thinking about or considering when they're looking to switch an API provider for messaging?
I think that they should be considering, definitely looking at all of the documentation to see that it like supports their use cases. I would say that they should be considering I would think about like what that implementation means for their customers, like how that's going to impact their end users. And I would suggest them to partner with somebody that is going to give them that level of support because it is a complicated and nuanced space, the SMS world. And so you really want somebody that's going to partner with you and not just say that they're going to do that, but they're going to like deliver on that. So I would think like trusting that the support is going to mirror what they're sold on. Yeah.
Awesome. I agree with that. Aaron, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I mean, I'm going to ask a tough question here, not on you, but to myself or back. What are some things that Telgorithm, we always want to make sure we're refining ourselves. What is it that we could be doing better, even better? Or what is it like, hey, we're missing this. I wish they also had that on top of this. So we talked a lot today about what we are doing right, and we continue to expand that, but we're always trying to push the bar. What are some things you could throw out there that potentially you would like to see as we continue to iterate on our product and our service?
I'm just thinking about the process of getting numbers approved, but like some of that's out of your control. So I don't know. I think like expectations on timelines maybe could be helpful. I feel like that's a big one that like, that's something that we're giving information to our customer when they sign up for two-way texting, like here's the approval process and here's what it could look like. So I feel like really having that, I think we already have it, but maybe like upfront, like that type of clarity on what that looks like. Sometimes like campaigns get denied, which I feel like that is something that just happens, and it could be because like they don't have their privacy policy on their page or whatever it is. But yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to think of really like ways that like it impacts our customers. That could be things that could be approved upon, but I can't think of much.
I'll add a few points here just in that regard that you may or may not be aware of. So today, this is industry wide as well for the most part. When you submit a campaign, so when one of your customers submits a campaign for a use case, there is a $15 should be one time vetting fee. That is not to hire the throughputs on a campaign. That is just to get the campaign approved in and of itself. Because as we discussed today, upstream, there's this team of people meaning salaries at DCA that are manually reviewing these campaigns. And so they're not going to eat the cost, so they pass it down, unfortunately. And so the reason I bring this up is if you submit a campaign and the campaign gets rejected, innocently, I missed something, I didn't put an opt-out verbiage, something was wrong with the website, we don't know, right? If it gets rejected and then you fix it and you resubmit the campaign, forgetting about the delay, every time you resubmit a campaign, there's another $15 fee they charge. So let's just say you didn't have the right guidance with a given provider. You could submit the same campaign 5 times and pay 15 times 5 just to get it approved, let alone the frustrations to your customer, along with the cost on top of that and the time that it is to approve. What Telgorithm has created because of our partnerships with DCA is we have actually a 3-step process. Process number 1 is we review your campaigns and give you the feedback. I'm sure you've seen that before. Hey, we've seen this campaign. We've seen this. Hey, go fix this or go fix that. Not only that, once we approve it, we take a look at it. We have this set up with DCA where there's a tier 1-2 approach. So that means there's a tier 1 at DCA that kind of pre-screens it and says, hey, this looks good or fix this stuff here. Now it's in this stage that 95% of campaigns that have an issue of some sort get flagged. And the reason this is good with Telgorithm setup is because if it gets flagged at this stage, and you have a chance to fix it, re-update the campaign, you will not be charged an additional $15 for that. When after it's approved at this tier level 1, we'll say at the DCA and goes to tier level 2, there's only a 5% chance that it will actually get rejected at the DCA level. If it gets rejected at DCA level is where that $15 fee is. So not only are we pre-screening it in this regard, we have created a buffer in the process that literally has up to a 95% success rate. So yes, we provide you the guidance up front, but even still, if there's still something missed, you'll still have up to 95% guarantee where you'll only be charged one time for that campaign versus who knows how many times. And let alone, and it's good you're not experiencing this, but with other providers, because we talk with prospects daily on this, they're getting a rejection. There's no guidance at all. I don't know what to do, or we just can't support this. Wait, you can't support spas? What's wrong with a spa? I don't know. We can't support it right now. I don't know what to tell you. I mean, that's the responses that many are getting across the board today. And so we're happy to be in a position where we've built the relationships with the campaign registry itself and with the aggregators itself to be able to stay on top of this. Again, it is, we'll say, annoying. No one's gonna, sugarcoat that. But what we make it our job to do is to stay in the loop and stay on top of it as fast as possible as these changes happen to try to get that across. And to your point, I could see a frustration. Hey, I didn't know this, or somebody submits something this week, and then there was a change between this week and last week. Right, because there are some changes there, and it can cause a point of frustration there. And we could do a better job, an even better job potentially at relaying more information and being cleaner about that. And there's always work to do in that area there. I just wanted to point out some of the kind of behind the scenes when it comes to campaign approval in this area.
Yeah, that's super interesting.
And Aaron, regarding turn-up times, I mean, I know there's a lot of different ways to look at that, and it refers to a lot of different aspects. Do you want to comment on that at all?
Yeah, so you could check out some of my prior or our prior webinars on this subject where we talk about this a lot. But basically, there are and I'll try to high level this one this time. But basically, there are only a handful of what's called DCAs. That means direct connect aggregators. So no one really cares about what this is for the most part. Why should you care? These are the companies that actually send your message directly to T-Mobile or AT&T. They have the binds built directly with them. And so I'll just give an example. I'll just throw out some names out there, Plevo, Bandwidth, and Twilio. So those three companies that most people, Vonage, 4. So just to be fair here, those 4 companies are not DCAs. They are middlemen. They use a DCA to get your message across. And when it comes to text messaging, many people don't know that. And the reason that's important is because there's only about 5 DCAs that even exist. Of the 5, there's only 2 that are really handled probably like 80% of all messaging traffic in North America. So if you could figure this, as I said, there's people manually reviewing campaigns at this one DCA. And what I'll say is that Twilio, Plevo, Telnix, and Bandwidth all use that single very same DCA, believe it or not. So if you go to any of these vendors, you're actually in the same place, really. Many people don't really understand that or realize that, and that it's going to that same vetting room. And so with all of these changes happening constantly, and now with the mandates getting stronger and stronger, whether it be for the blockages or heavier pass-through fees or not being able to send at all, everyone is rushing now to become registered, and that's caused an industry-wide backup. And so you start compounding that with changes to the rules, right? Today, I want no third-party sharing in the privacy policy except if it has this clause. And so you have, this buildup at this one main aggregator, which most of these main vendors use. Now, we multi-thread between 2, and we're working with a secondary aggregator now to speed up that process and actually take away the $15 fee completely by the end of this year. We expect that to be the case, and potentially to streamline this completely via Telgorithm. But as of today, we are also on the same speed with that same aggregator that most are using today. And so hence there is this little backup. You start compounding the wait time, with the queue along with the constant changes. And that's where you start to get a little bit of a delay. So it actually used to be, many don't know this, believe it or not, with Telgorithm at the beginning of this year to get a campaign approved actually took less than 5 minutes. People are like, wait, what? Yes, it actually took less than 5 minutes. as things have rolled out and changed and these, the industry cutovers have happened, is what's extended. And sometimes there's complications behind the scenes. For instance, about a month or two ago, there's a concept called FIFO, which means first in, first out. So they're supposed to be handling all the campaigns in order. And somehow, due to a TCR or campaign registry setup, there was a way where everything got jarbled. So you might have had a campaign that I submitted yesterday, and like, wait, that just got approved, but then there's something that was still waiting for 4 weeks. How did that happen? And so that was only noticed about a month and a half ago at this main DCA, and they're still working their way through trying to get that all back in order. So while you can see some delays, as I mentioned, with Telgorithm, you can send unregistered traffic during this period. But while you have seen some of these delays come up, we expect them now. They're trying to catch up, and we expect that to recede as we get into the latter part of this year on that side of things. So that's essentially kind of a peek into the behind the scenes of what's going on in general. I will point out with Telgorithm as well, so maybe you can get something delayed by 2 to 3 weeks. Potentially, there are other vendors, some of which I mentioned today, where people are waiting for approvals for 2+ months. 2+ months. And by the way, with those vendors, you can't even send unregistered traffic anymore. So it's something that we're closely tied to, closely monitoring, and always looking for ways, as I mentioned, by the end of this year, just for us and our setup, because of our unique tech and our unique relationship and the way we go about compliance in general, has built us a trust. And because we talk to all of our customers, we know who they are, versus, maybe a company that has thousands of customers. For many years, they have no clue who's under the hood already. It's hard to go back and refilter. Oh, this is a good one. This is, maybe a spammy user. We don't have that problem, because from day one, we went through this process and have tech to monitor that. And that allows us abilities that maybe some of these other vendors don't have, which we're glad to be able to share as time goes on with our customers as well. So just alluding to some of the things behind the scene that relate to some of these delays. But like I said, over time, we expect that to recede. And I would even say potentially as soon as next year, there may be a process through Telgorithm where it's literally completely streamlined. Literally could take like 2 minutes or less, and you'll get an instant approval on that side of things. So we're working very hard on that right now, and it's something to be able to expect to come in the short-term future.
For sure. I was surprised when I started diving into SMS and all of our use cases that like the DCA approval process was manual. Like I was surprised to hear that. Like, is that something that you guys talk a lot about on your side? And do you feel like there's ever an automated world that would come?
Yeah, good question. So as I'll allude to some of our prior webinars where I discussed this exact issue, but I'll rehash it here for a little bit, just for the knowledge of everyone joining today. So actually, when TCR was first started, it was completely automated. Matter of fact, it was completely automated till the beginning of 2023. Literally completely automated. What happened was in early 2023, there were some businesses in the cannabis industry, which is what's called a shaft violation. So shaft, tobacco, cannabis equals that. And just to give a quick, reference there, because we've seen some, try to come up abroad in that area. It's not about the content of shaft. It's simply just being a shaft business, because cannabis, that particular vertical, even though it is legalized in many states, but because the network operators that you're trying to send these messages to are federally licensed, until this becomes federalized, it will not be allowed. Meaning it's not about the content. It's not about opt-in. The end user wants to get it. It's more of a situation where just being a cannabis business alone, that in and of itself disqualifies you from sending text messages today to the network operators because of that federal license issue and the federal legal requirement there. But anyways, that's just a side note. Earlier this year, some of these businesses tried to sneak in to the A2P 10DLC world. And as you know, hey, an automated process. Let me see if I can get part of that. And there's a lot of advantages. We didn't even discuss throughputs today and all the advantages of that on A2P 10DLC. And so I don't want to have to procure 1,000 numbers just to be able to message my customers. If I could have one that has unlimited throughputs or very high throughputs, I'm going to rather do that. And so, and also there's a lot better deliverability on ATP kinesis. So some folks in the cannabis industry tried to use some of that automation. And about May of last year, T-Mobile got complaints from some end users that said, hey, we're getting, and forget about the opt-in, we're getting messages with cannabis content. And T-Mobile did a lookup to figure out which DCA is this coming from. And it came from this main DCA. I didn't mention their name today, but this main DCA that Twilio and others are using. And so last summer, many were not aware of this, T-Mobile went to this DCA and said, going forward, we need you to manually check each and every single campaign going forward before you upload it into what's called SDG, which is T-Mobile's campaign registry platform. So manual means people means cost. That's the $15 fee. Hence, so last summer, this past summer, it went from instant to, first it went to a day, then 2 days. It was about 2 days last summer. But then, January of this year, we have Bandwidth and others start to announce cutoffs and higher pass-through fees. All of a sudden, everyone's going, they want to register. So that back room of that team of people that's manually vetting stuff that maybe had X workload last summer, now it's been 100X. And that's where you have this issue. So to your point, yes, the initial intent was to make this easy for legitimate businesses. And unfortunately, that got ruined a little bit in that process. And I do believe it'll come back to that point, but they've gotten to a point where we're going to be very hard on this as the final stages of this is rolled out. And once it's there, I expect over time it'll start to recede back, particularly with providers that have something called Know Your Customer, or in the industry, it's called KYC, in the sense that that's what we're working on at Pathros, as I just alluded to a little bit earlier. With our DCA, they know Telgorithm, they know our customers, we have a good track record, and so therefore they cut us slack not only for unregistered messages today for legitimate businesses to get live and running, but also early next year to be able to go to a path where, hey, we know as a CNP, a connectivity partner, that the CSPs like Walla that are under Telgorithm are good to go, and we're going to allow this automated process to proceed forward. So we are working on that path actively now. And I do see a path early next year, potentially, where this can potentially be completely automated because of that process, particularly for Telgorithm and maybe some others there. But that we have the advantages of being a little bit smaller in the sense that we got started off on the right foot in the right way to be able to go down this path now. So that's kind of the trajectory. It was automated, then it kind of went to the wayside, and that's what we're experiencing here. And we're working towards a path to get back there.
That's awesome. That's super exciting.
There's a light at the end of the tunnel. Julia, thank you so much for being here with us. Did you have any final thoughts you want to share, or any, updates on Walla, what's coming up for Walla?
Yeah. Walla, what's next for Walla? We always talk about international expansion. So I feel like that's something that we can look out for in the upcoming future. But definitely just keeping up with the industry, seeing what's next. We, like I mentioned, launched our marketing automation, our marketing suite. So adding more enhancements and features there. And then we'll also be launching a branded app very soon as well. So that's pretty excited. That will be giving our customers the opportunity to have an app with all of their branding on it. So excited.
Awesome.
That's
things
really
to come.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Awesome. And Aaron, any final thoughts from you?
No, like I said, it's always great from connecting with in general, but always hearing from customers and hearing what we're doing right, and even maybe where we have potential to improve. Like I said, the customer is always the bread and butter for any business, and whether it's looked at that way for another business, I don't know. But that is really important for Telgorithm, not only today, but since our inception, because of where it's in our blood and where we come from and what we expect as being the customer ourselves. And so we're super appreciative for you to come forward and share this, because I know even sometimes many folks have a good experience. It's another thing to get on the call, get on the phone and get publicly and say this. So we are truly appreciative for you doing that today and making the time to do this, Julie. And I hope we could do this again. Maybe have a check-in at some point in the future and check in how things are coming along further for you guys.
Yeah, let's do it. This was awesome. Thanks for having me. It was great chatting with you guys.
You too. Thank you so much. And thank you for everyone who joined us. We hope to hear from you soon. Have a great day.